Hello, welcome to Chats with Chelsi. I'm your host, Chelsi Bennett. I'm thrilled you joined us today because we are starting a weeks-long series about mental illness. You heard me right, mental illness. We'll be talking about it. There's so many different stigmas, especially in the African American community. Today we'll start off with a clinical perspective from Anita Stoudmire, who's a professional licensed therapist. So we're going to hear all about her background and hear from a therapist of what it means to go to a counselor, what it means to get that professional help. And then starting next week, we'll have our first ever Chats with Chelsi panel where there's going to be 3 incredible women who will share their personal mental health journeys with us. So let's get started with Anita. Well, Anita, welcome to Chats with Chelsi. I'm so excited that you're here. You are the beginning of this amazing series that's going to be starting in October. October 10th is World Mental Health Day. Let me get that right. And I thought, as we'll hear stories in the coming weeks, that we should start with the clinical perspective. We should start with a Black woman who is a therapist to get your insight. So thank you, Anita, for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
So let's jump right in. Tell us about yourself.
So I am a licensed professional therapist, and I recently, just on July 1st, opened my own private practice.
Congratulations.
So thank you.
The photos were beautiful.
Thank you. So this has been about a 10-year journey, and this was kind of the top of the mountain for me. Just going out on my own, opening my own practice, being able to niche down into what I'm most passionate about in mental health. So I've just opened the practice. It's been about 7 weeks now. Things are going pretty good. So it's exciting. It's exciting.
Why did you want to become a therapist, Anita?
Well, I used to be a school teacher. So this is actually my second career. I was a school teacher for 12 years and love children, still volunteer in my church in the children's ministry for 13 years. And I was actually...
And thank you for doing that, because that is truly a ministry. I'm married to a pastor, so children's ministry is you.
It's needed. And that's how I got started in it, because when I first came here to Richmond, I was a single mother. I had 3 small children, and I sat out of church for a while because a lot of the churches that I was attending didn't have a children's ministry. When I found the church that I'm attending now, it allowed me to bring my children, who were all very small, and for me to sit in church. And so I decided to make it my heart's work to keep doing that for other people. So
I love that.
So I was a school teacher for many years. Then I stayed at home with my children for another 12, 13 years. And as they got older, I started to think about what I wanted to do next. I didn't see myself going back into teaching, and I always had a heart for helping people. I had the gift of counsel and motivating people and inspiring people, and so I decided to become a therapist. That made sense.
So what was that journey? So school teacher, you spent time as a stay-at-home mom, you made the decision to be a therapist, but take us through what that training looked like, what that process looked like, and even finding your first job as a therapist.
Right. So I had gone through a divorce and was living in Cleveland, Ohio. And so I relocated here to Richmond because my mother lived here and I needed her assistance with my 3 small children. And God put it on my heart to become a licensed therapist because, again, I was already helping people, talking with people, inspiring people, counseling people, but He put it on my heart that this was something that I was going to do in a bigger way. And so He made an amazing path for me to go back to school to get my graduate degree, and I mean, it was only God, because I didn't have any money. I had these 3 small kids, but all these people started rallying around me. I got funds to go to school. I got funds to put my children in daycare when I needed to. And so it really was His design for this to happen. So 3.5 years in graduate school, 2,000 hours. You have to do 2,000 hours to get your license, and then you have to sit for that licensing exam. And that was another year of studying and preparing. And then I went into community mental health, which I do encourage people to do, because you're going to see pretty much every diagnosis in the DSM, and you need to have that as a strong foundation before you can go on to other things. So I worked in community mental health in the city's CSB, it's called RBHA. I worked there for many years as a case manager. Then I went into managed care. I've been working in the hospitals. I kind of did a little bit of everything. In jail. And then decided, okay, there is a specific population that I want to speak to, and I went into a group practice as a therapist.
Tell us, what is DSM?
The diagnostic manual, the manual that you diagnose mental health illnesses. So
didn't even know the
diagnosis statistical manual. Yes, and it is a very big book that we have to read and study and memorize. Right.
So this journey has been one that has been inspired by God. You saw His hand all in the mix of it, and then you have spent time, like you said, doing a little bit of everything. Right. Tell us why, as a Black woman, owning your practice was one of your own practice was one of your goals.
For me, entrepreneurship's in my blood. This is not the first business that I've owned. I used to own a bakery when I lived in Atlanta. So I've always had this in my blood to work for myself. I've always had it in my blood. Freedom is one of the highest values that I have. Freedom. Time freedom, money freedom. That is who I am as a person. That's my highest value. And so entrepreneurship aligns with freedom. It says that I get to pave my own way. I get to make as much or as little as I want, depending on how hard I work. I get to manage my time. And so this is my third, fourth business. So I owned a bakery when I lived in Atlanta. I started a children's safety t-shirt business. I started as a dating and relationship coach online, which I still do that work.
Right.
And then now I own my own practice doing therapy. So it makes sense for me to work for me. Like, that totally makes sense in my mind because freedom is my number one value.
Anita, I wanted to start off with your journey because as we delve into, this is for some, I think, especially in the African American community, mental health is a sensitive topic. It's a sticky topic. There's stigmas that are related to it. And so as you shared your perspective, I wanted the Chats with Chelsi community to know who they were listening to.
Right.
And why you're here in that chair today versus several others is because I'm excited to be able to help educate and bring awareness. I'm a policy nerd, and so I looked up a statistic, and it said that 6.8 million Black people, African American people in America, are walking around with a diagnosable mental illness.
That's probably correct.
Why do you say that?
Well, I mean, we have a long and rich history in this country, first of all. And, there's been a lot of trauma in our community, and we have not addressed it. Or when we've sought to address it, we have not used psychiatry as a medical practice to address it. We've addressed it through the church or religion. We've addressed it through substance abuse. We've addressed it through other issues, but really the stigma is around going to a professional and sitting down and talking with someone. The stigma is around possibly needing to take medication. Those are things that we're not getting enough conversation about. Now, if we want to go and talk to our auntie or our grandmother, if we want to talk to our pastor or a deacon, those are more acceptable things, but going to speak to a medical professional, maybe taking medication, those are things that are kind of taboo in our community.
So let's hit those areas. What's your view on folks going to their pastor, their priest, their deacon to get assistance if they feel that they are suffering from some type of mental health illness?
I think that they can be very helpful to the person spiritually, and I think that they can guide them to what could be the next step. So thinking about us as people holistically, I do think spirituality is a huge part of it, but we also know that there could be a chemical part of it, a chemical imbalance, and that, because a pastor is not a doctor, is not a psychiatrist, he may not have the information which to say, this could be a chemical imbalance. It could be more than just a typical sadness or a typical grief. I want you to see your doctor, see a medical professional or a psychiatrist that can kind of assess that. So while I think it's very helpful, I think from a holistic perspective, we all need to work together. I would love to see more pastors referring to therapists, to doctors, and vice versa. I, as a therapist, and I'm also a Christian counselor, I got my master's degree from Liberty. So
Okay.
I fold that in as well. I fold the spiritual piece in as well, along with, studies and statistics and medicine and the psychiatry piece of it. I can fold all of that in, but I'd like to see our community kind of be more holistic.
I love that, as you said, that you pull it all in, because
Mhm.
several years ago, I'm from Florida. When I was back in Florida, it was actually my church that recommended me to a therapist,
Mhm.
because the spiritual part, it was okay, but there's more help that you
Right.
need than I'm able to provide. But what I loved for me personally, as a Christ follower, as a
Mhm.
Christian, was that they referred me to a Christian therapist.
Mhm.
And that was important to me, because what I found was that I was pouring so much out that I needed to be filled back up with not only the medical perspective of it, but also coupling that with the word. And so it's always great to meet counselors, therapists, who, when appropriate, will tie that in to help kind of bridge that gap.
Yeah.
And so that's great. So just so many different nuggets in what you're saying. So we talked about the church. Let's talk in religion, and so whatever your religion may be, having that spiritual aspect. But let's talk about medication.
Mm-hmm. And medication can be necessary. Our brains are made up of lots of different hormones, and you've got dopamine, you've got endorphins, you've got serotonin. You need all of these things, and for a lot of people, these chemicals become imbalanced. Some people, it's believed that genetically, that this is a genetic disposition. For some people, it could be situational. It really depends. Every person is case by case. One of the things I always tell my clients that is kind of tricky about psychiatric medicine is we can't take a picture of the inside of your brain, unlike a broken arm or if you have a virus. So some of it is kind of trial and error. We're kind of just, we're getting your feedback, we're getting your family members' feedback. That's why it's so important that other people are involved in your care. Because there may be things you can't see that other people can see. So the doctor's taking all of that into account when he's giving you medication, how the medication's working, how you seem to be doing, how your mood is. So he's getting lots of different perspectives, not just yours. But medication sometimes is necessary. So, and I want us to be open to that and not feel like, well, I'm not taking any medications. I don't want to be taking that for the rest of my life. Some people do need it in order to balance the chemicals that are in their brain.
What's the youngest age you've diagnosed someone with a mental illness?
I used to work with children when I was at the city CSB, and so you have children as young as 5 or 6 years old.
And was it situational or was it genetic?
Well, it was brought on by trauma, and so we see a lot of trauma with children, whether it be their sexual abuse, physical abuse in the home, PTSD. We're seeing a lot of PTSD here in Richmond, in areas of Richmond where they are witnessing shootings, they're witnessing domestic violence. So that can be manifested in a child, and then if not treated, it can get worse as they get older.
So because of trauma, they can go from being a healthy young kid to someone who is manic depressive. I mean, what are some of the other illnesses that you've seen from child trauma?
Anxiety is the number one. So think about if you were exposed to an event or something very traumatic that happened. That then leaves an imprint on you. And so that creates a type of anxiety of, is it safe to, is it safe to be here? Is mom or dad, something going to happen to them? Is something going to happen to me? So while I want to believe that childhood should be relatively carefree, we're seeing children worrying about things that, in my opinion, they shouldn't be worried about. And that gets ramped up into this chronic anxiety, this chronic fear of everything. So anxiety is the number one, and then that can then be expressed with depressive symptoms, feeling like, well, I mean, what's the point? Feeling helpless and hopeless. So anxiety and depression, we're seeing that more and more in children.
So when I think about mental health, mental illness, a diagnosis, one of the things initially, until I was doing research, I didn't think about anxiety or depression.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking about someone who's schizophrenic.
Right.
And so when we go to that part of the spectrum, is that one that you can be born with? Is that something that's brought on by trauma as well? I ask because there could be someone listening to this now who knows, or bipolar, who knows that, listen, something is off with me.
Right.
But where did this come from? And because they don't know where it comes from, they don't even want to seek help.
Right. Well, there's lots of theories.
Okay.
And again, because psychiatry is one of those things where, we don't have specific, defined, this is the root cause. So there's lots of different theories. And then also in psychiatry, you have that nature versus nurture.
Okay.
And so
I
have even fallen on both sides of the fence. So I have said to some of the clients that I see, they will come in and they'll suffer from anxiety and they'll say, well, my mom was anxious, my dad, my grandparents were anxious. I have to ask myself, did that come from genetics? Did they pass it down in their DNA? Or was it learned by watching these people be anxious? So it could go either way. So sometimes when I'm working with a client over time, I determine this is probably nurture. This is probably what your parents taught you. This is how you watched that they modeled this behavior and you in turn said, yes, this is the way to be. That's what I have determined most often. Every now and again, I will see families where depression runs through the family and there may be a genetic component. But most times it's what's modeled. And because 98% of us, we weren't raised in perfect homes by perfect parents. They did their best with what they knew.
Right.
But we pass along these things unknowingly to our kids, being anxious, being nervous, and worrying, and letting it keep us up at night, and whether it's we have eating where we're eating when we're nervous or we're eating when we're depressed. Those are habits that we can pick up just from being around our caretakers. That's how we kind of manage our mental health. So some of it, like I said, you've got two sides of the fence. You've got the genetic side where people say, no, this was passed down through a person's genes. Then you have the other side that says, no, this is what the children picked up because it was modeled. So we really could go either way.
And does it depend how you treat it? Does that depend on whether it was nature or nurture?
Not usually. So the way we treat different medical diagnoses like anxiety, we're going to pretty much treat it the same, and there's lots of different treatments. I specialize in what's called solution-focused brief therapy.
Okay.
So I am one of those clinicians that does not believe in people being in therapy for years and years unless there is very serious trauma. There'd have to be some serious trauma, or if you're experiencing a medical condition that's going on for years and years. But usually when people come in, I can give them some skills within a matter of months, and as long as they're applying it, they get better. Now, if they're not, then things pretty much stay the same. But it's really the work that they do outside of therapy that makes the difference.
The homework.
Mm-hmm.
You've been a therapist for several years. What are the most common, traits, characteristics of someone who has anxiety and someone who has depression?
So anxiety is pretty much, it's displayed through a person's fear. So we think about it like this. Anxiety is future-based. It's what could happen. And depression is really past-based. It's usually what has happened.
I've never thought about it.
So it's what has happened that we can't change, that we wish we could change. And and I just feel guilt and shame and bad about it. Those are people who are depressed. But anxious people, it's about what could happen. What should I do? What may happen? So it's more future based when I'm thinking of those two different things. And so depression may look like low feelings of self-worth, poor self-esteem, feeling helpless and hopeless. Because again, and a lot of it's because they're concerned about something that technically they can't change. Right. So that is very helpless and hopeless. You can't change the past, and they feel depressed. And so it's hard for them maybe to sleep at night, or maybe they're sleeping too much. They don't take good care of themselves. They may overeat, maybe they undereat. So depending on who has the depression, the symptoms can look different.
And same with anxiety?
Anxiety can be marked by this excessive worry. You may have tics where people bite their nails or pull their hair or pluck their skin. All these things can, that's how they're managing their anxiety. But people can also drink. People can also overeat with anxiety. People can also be difficult to manage in the sense of they have these obsessive compulsive thoughts of what could happen. And so they're ramping themselves up. They're just constantly nervous and anxious. So a little bit different, but there are some symptoms that are the same.
Well, as you talked about biting your nails, I don't do that anymore. But for much of my childhood, I did. And for me, it's been over the past maybe 3 years since I moved to Richmond. I started completely over that I've had to ask myself, do I have anxiety? Do I have anxiety issues? Yes, because I'm a planner, so I'm always trying to plan everything. I want to control everything. This is how it should go. God, I'll trust you with this part, but this is the part. And so, as you said that, it just was a trigger of,
That was your method of self-soothing.
Yes, I would bite my nails. And it would be like, oh, it's about to bleed. Why? And yeah, I did it for years. So much so that I'm convinced my mother let me get artificial nails before she initially was going to let me get them.
Okay.
So I could stop. And I stopped.
Okay.
I stopped. And so, but it's very, this is, we're sitting here having a conversation, but I'm examining myself. I'm getting some therapy, but just by learning. But thank you for breaking down just some of these simple concepts. So for the person out there who is experiencing some of the symptoms you just described for either depression or anxiety, who happens to be a Black woman or a Black female, why should they not be afraid to go get help?
The first thing they should ask themselves is it situational? So that's going to make a huge difference. Is it situational? Is there something happening in my life that I am anxious or depressed about? So for depression, that looks like the death of a loved one, the death of a pet. That looks like a breakup. That looks like being laid off from work or not getting a promotion that I wanted. That looks like, something has happened and I'm feeling, not great about it. I'm feeling sad about it. Then we have to ask ourselves, how long have I felt this way? So has it been a few weeks? Has it been a few months? Has it been a year? So that is very telling. So the longer this goes on, it is leading us to, this has gone on for a long time. I might want to talk with someone about this. I might want to seek help about this. Some people have the ability to self-soothe, and that fits their needs just fine. They're able to manage their life and get up and go to work and do what they need to do. Others have healthy ways of self-soothing or unhealthy ways of self-soothing. So we have to check in on that. Is this a healthy way to self-soothe? Which is taking a nap or taking a hot bath when I'm stressed or reading or taking a walk in nature, walking my dog. Those are all healthy ways to self-soothe. Then we have unhealthy ways. Drinking, over drinking. We have having sex with people we shouldn't. We have eating too much. We have sleeping too much or maybe not sleeping at all. So there's or spending money we shouldn't. So there are different ways in which we self-soothe, and so that's also going to tell us, I probably should see someone about this. I've been sleeping a lot, I haven't been taking care of myself, I've been eating a lot, I haven't gone outside of my house in days. So all those things are going to tell us, okay, it's time for me to talk with someone. It's time for me to see if this is more than just, a funk. Because we all get into a funk where bad things happen.
Yeah, that's right.
We feel some kind of way about them. But if it goes on for too long, if it is seriously disrupting our life, then yes, they should talk with somebody.
So let's go a little bit deeper. So they've answered those two major questions you posed. They need help. But the stigma of coming to sit down and lay on someone's couch is keeping them. I mean, what do you say to them what would you say?
I would say, first of all, you can start with where you're comfortable, which is talking to a friend, talking to a family member, talking to your pastor or a deacon at church, if that's where you're comfortable. Because we all need to talk with someone about things going on in our life. So most people start there. And then you can propose this idea of, maybe this is more serious than just a little funk. And you'd be surprised at how many people may suggest that you go to see a therapist or to see a psychiatrist, or you can start with your family practice doctor. That's a good place to start if you don't want to go to a psychiatrist, first of all.
From the clients that you've served, have you encountered African Americans who are very hesitant to open up in their sessions with you?
I am a client. I am a client whisperer in the sense that that's not really happened to me.
Okay.
And I've had very difficult clients, and I enjoy working with them because there's a gifting that I have. So I haven't had that issue. I've heard other people say that, but I haven't had that issue. I have men. I have African American men, quite a few, that come to my practice and let it all out. And I'm like, good. I applaud that. I want to see more of them come. I want to see more of them heal because we all need to heal from something.
Right.
So that hasn't been my particular sticking point because I believe I'm the client whisperer in the sense of there is no judgment. There is no shame or blame. My office is, everyone says that, I just started crying the moment I hit the door. I said, yeah, because the chi in here is good. The energy in here is good. It's a healing energy. So that hasn't been an issue, but I have had people struggle to just get there. But then once they're there, they're like, this place feels safe. I'm going to let it all out. And they always feel better when they leave. So I just encourage people to try it because you're going to feel better when you leave. This person's objective. This person also has no agenda. So we have to be very cautious when we're talking to friends or family members because they're all talking to us from their worldview.
Right.
But your therapist has no agenda. Like, I don't know these people. I don't know who you're talking about. And, you can, and it's safe and it's your time. It's your time to kind of get some things off your chest. Let it all out.
Well, if you're in the Richmond area, we have a client whisperer with us, okay? So if you try, several times, give Anita a try. But let's talk about that. I know of women who have not been successful at finding a therapist. They went to one, they went to two, they went to three.
I've heard that.
What should any person, black or white, I just had kind of pulled on your experiences with the African American community because it's such a stigma,
right?
I shared before there are with my Caucasian friends. I remember growing up, and it was just a part of their life. Our family goes to therapy. I'm going for my quarterly check-in, and that was just so foreign to me. And so for me and my personal experiences, I've seen, just my Caucasian friends so open and my African American friends like, no, I'm not going to sit on anybody's couch. But let's talk about what should any person who's answered those 2 questions you posed earlier, they know they need some help.
Right.
What should they look for in a therapist when they're selecting, their first one?
Right. So they want to find someone who's licensed, first of all, and you can look that up on the licensing board. You can look up that the person is in fact licensed. You may want to know what their experience has been, how long they've been licensed, what their specialties are. That's very important.
Okay.
So I was a generalist when I initially, got licensed. I did a little bit of everything, but now I have a niche, and that is something that I'm most passionate about. That's my area of expertise. And so I would encourage them, if they have trauma, if they have sexual abuse in their past, they want to look for someone certified in that area. That is really, really important. You have therapists out here who are what we call generalists, where they want to just deal with everything, but chances are they're not going to get the best care going that route. There's lots of specialty therapies out there, depending on what, there's OCD therapists and therapists who specialize in anxiety. So yes, I would encourage you to ask them, what is their specialization and where they got trained in that. That's really, really important. And then most therapists do offer a 15-minute consultation, and use your discernment. Like I often tell people, trust your gut. Really trust your gut with talking to this person, sharing what you're coming in to talk about. And if you just don't get a good feeling, if you don't get a kind of warm and fuzzy feeling, just a feeling of there's no judgment or anything, then don't go in that direction. You got to kind of get a good feeling, about that person. But they should be licensed. They should specifically serve what you're going in to talk about. They should have some sort of certification in that or training in that. And then just ask for that consultation. If you can get it even on video chat, that's helpful, or just over the phone. And then just trust your gut, like really trust your gut. The other thing I would say is referrals, people who are already going and love their therapist. That's a great way to find a therapist. 90% of my business is referrals. The people who come tell other people. And then they come and they're like, oh, she's great.
That's how it works.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So we've had, I think, a very robust conversation today. We've talked about mental illnesses. We've talked about how to find a therapist, what to look for in a therapist. And it's okay to talk to your family, your friends, your pastor, yet to be aware of when you need to cross over into the clinical part. You've even shared with us, which I think is so important, to not be afraid of medication.
Right.
So as we close, Anita, tell us, what are some other tools that we can use? I know we've talked about family, we've talked about friends, but what are some other tools that you often recommend in the process of their healing journey? They're with a therapist. What are some of those other tools?
So the first thing I do with every single person who comes in my door is we learn how to cope. That is a skill. That is a skill that healthy people have. They know how to cope because life is going to happen. Bad things will happen. No one is promised a perfect life. We're going to have things that happen to us. We need to learn how to cope with them.
That's good.
So I tell people coping is nothing more than feeling good, right? Something bad has happened. I feel awful. Oh, I just feel so awful. Okay, now I want you to think of things in your life that make you feel good. Write them down. Use your 5 senses when you're thinking of things that make you feel good. So I have all of my clients create what's called a coping list. And under each sense, I ask them some things that make them feel good. So sight, they will say, oh, just the sight of my children's faces, them smiling. Okay, sound. Oh, I love music. I love to listen to this type of music. Taste. Oh, I love eating chocolate, especially if it's like got mint in it. I love that. Touch. I love petting my cat. And then last one, so sight, sound, taste, touch, smell. Could be, oh, I have the most beautiful lavender candle that I love the smell of, or I love the smell of fresh cut flowers. So you're going to think of things under each of your senses that makes you feel good. And then you're going to do it. That's it. That's all coping is we do things that help us to feel a little bit better when we're feeling bad. That's it. But coping, so many people don't know how to cope. Bad things happen to them, and they will choose things that are unhealthy to cope. Drinking, drugs, again, having sex with people they shouldn't, spending money they shouldn't. And those are all temporary fixes. They don't last. But these other things, walking out in nature, exercising, listening to uplifting music, talking to a friend, laughing, all those things have long-term benefits that are really going to help you to cope. But coping is one of the things that I teach people to do. And it's unfortunate that most people kind of don't know that. But it's a simple thing, but it's a powerful thing, which is learning how to cope.
Right. For the person out there who's listening who says, this has resonated with me, I need a therapist, but it's not in my budget, what do you say?
We have some options. So all therapy right now is covered under most people's insurance, even if you have Medicaid, Medicare, and all the other thousands of insurances out there. You can find a therapist that takes your insurance. And if you have Medicaid or Medicare, there's no copay. So I would encourage people to go on Psychology Today and put in your insurance, and you're going to find all the therapists listed under there that take your insurance. Then you have therapists who offer a sliding fee scale, or they will do pro bono work. I myself do pro bono work. So 5 slots a month out of my practice, I keep those slots open for people who cannot afford therapy and who do not have insurance. Because I do believe everyone should have access to some form of mental health care. But there are lots of therapists who also do that too.
Well, thank you for doing that, though. I am so grateful for your time today, for your insights, to learn more about the journey of where you are. And I know for many folks, I don't want to overgeneralize it, but it's helpful to know that there are Black therapists who can be someone that they can go and talk to help them. It was so encouraging to hear that you had Black men coming to you. Because as we think about World Mental Health Day, and to know that there are 6.8 million Black folks in America, it's just thank you for what you do. Thank you for what you do.
Yes. It's my calling. It's what I believe I was gifted to do. So.
Wow. As you can see, during our conversation, I was triggered. I was forced to examine myself and my mental health. I hope that there were similar experiences for many of you out there. There's so many stigmas in regards to therapy, especially in the African American community, yet we all need help sometime, and it's okay to see a therapist, to have medication, to go to your religious leader, whether that's your pastor, your priest, to talk to your girlfriends. Don't hold it all in. There's so much for you to gain by being free and to having the tools to be able to survive with whatever your mental illness is. I'm so grateful for Anita and her expertise she shared this week. Again, next week we will start with our first ever Chats with Chelsi panel. We have 3 incredible Black women who are keeping it raw, real, and honest. They will be sharing their mental health journey. So be sure to share this with a sister, friend, and a family member, and join us back here next week for our first panel on mental illness. Have a great week.